Can I secretly take over the world with religion? If I hire enough missionaries and convert every city, it might just work. Today I played 10,000 years of Sid Meier's Civilization 6. My journey began with the founding of the Polish Empire. I settled our very first city, Krakow, on a riverside next to a volcano. I ordered some brave warriors to head out and explore the lands around the city. That was when I looked into what technologies we could research. Those included pottery, animal husbandry, mining, sailing, and astrology. I ended up selecting mining as we had a whole bunch of stone and copper around our city. I had then ordered the training of a scout. Even though the warriors were fully capable of exploration, I planned on having them at the city center in case we ever needed to defend it. Until our very first scout was trained though, I'll have to send these guys out to explore. Sure enough, they had discovered a village. Once they arrived there, the villagers had shared some information on military traditionalism. This was a form of government that they were practicing, and we would maybe be able to adopt once we fully understood it. Right after that village, my warriors had discovered a natural wonder. Maybe these guys should be scouts after all. The wonder that we discovered was called Crater Lake. It appeared to just be a big crater filled with water. Well, I know where we're settling the next city at. I was ecstatic that we had discovered a wonder. It appeared that our information on astrology had increased because of it. This meant that when we want to research astrology, it's going to research a lot quicker. Well, what do you know? The scout is finally done training. It looks like we'll finally be able to put you to work. I started training yet another scout as it seemed like there was a lot of land around us that needed to be discovered. Before I bring the warriors back near the city, I want to explore a little bit more with them. They've had very good luck. Talking about luck, my scout had just discovered some information on foreign trade. This was incredible timing, because we had just discovered our very first city-state. Maybe these will be the very first people that we trade with. After doing a bit more exploration, my second scout had finished training. This now meant that we were going to be able to explore twice as fast. It also meant that I had to pick a new production for the city. While weighing my options, my most trusted advisor had suggested that I get some settlers together. I really liked this idea because it meant that we would be able to expand into another city. As the settlers began preparing their things, we had finished our research on mining. I knew exactly what research I wanted to do next. Astrology. My biggest motivation behind this was because we already had it halfway researched. Discovering that natural wonder really came in clutch. As I was looking at some information on our capital city, I had noticed that there was this random unit sitting right outside of our borders. This was a little bit strange, so I ended up ordering my warriors to get back to the city as soon as possible. As one of my scouts got a little bit closer to see what these people wanted, they had ran off. Well, that wasn't sus. I completely lost visuals on the mystery scout. I did have a general idea on where he was, but that intel is gonna get old. So I ended up sending one of my units right to the last location that they were seen at. We had come across more than just a mystery unit. My warriors had bumped into another city-state. They had also seen that city-state's warriors as well. They seemed friendly enough though. The city-state had completely abandoned visiting a village that both of us were heading towards. I will not forget this act of kindness, especially since we were able to get some information on a new type of government. I was able to get my warriors close enough to the mystery scout to see who it was. It ended up being a barbarian. My warriors immediately swung into action. They tried to take down the scout, but they only injured him. I think I found out where they came from. One of my units had discovered a barbarian camp. This made me pretty nervous because it meant that the barbarians were scouting out our city. On the bright side, however, we had established our very own code of law. This meant that I could assign two policies that our civilization had to follow. The two policies that I ended up going with were economic based. The first one, God King, had given the capital city +1 faith and 1 gold per turn. The second, urban planning, allowed us to get +1 production in every city that we had. After assigning those two policies, I had our civilization start focusing on foreign trade. We had already discovered a lot of knowledge on this from before, and it was finally time to finish it off. Randomly enough, a green and orange scout had run past my warriors. That's when the King of Hungary had reached out to me and introduced himself. I guess we don't have to worry about whose scout it is. King Matthias was very polite, so I showed him the same respect. After giving our pleasantries, we had both decided it would be beneficial to give the information of where our capitals were at. This ended up being a very good thing, because after I told my warriors to try and finish off the barbarian scout, King Matthias had sent over a delegation to solidify our friendship. Hey, the settlers are finally ready. I selected the training of builders as the next production of our city. This would allow us to finally utilize the copper and stone that was in our territory. Well, what do we have here? More rats. My warriors had discovered another barbarian encampment. This meant that there was one to the north of my city, as well as one to the east. What's next? We're gonna find one to the south now? I started moving my warriors in the general direction that my settlers were moving. I really didn't need them to get attacked while they're trying to found a new city. That new city is going to be located right next to the natural wonder of Crater Lake. Even though this was pretty far away from my capital, I wanted to make sure that I secured the natural wonder in my territory, before anybody else did at least. Before I even knew it, the research on astrology had finished. I immediately began the next one on writing. We already had it around halfway completed because we had met another civilization, and this granted us a lot of information on it. One of my scouts discovered another civilization. Immediately, the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick had reached out to me. Similar to Matthias of Hungary, the emperor was very polite. He had immediately sent a delegation right after we met. I had a pretty good feeling about the two civilizations that I've encountered so far. They both seemed like they wanted to be friends, and we would definitely be able to create a very strong pact. There was a lot going on. My builders had finished training, and my settlers had arrived at the location right next to Crater Lake. I then gave them the okay, and they had settled the city of Warsaw. The citizens of the Polish Empire were ecstatic about this. We had a brand new city, and we also now had a natural wonder in our territory. I really wanted to start planning for the long term. I wanted to see what victories I was leading in. It appeared that there were two: diplomacy and religion. Hungary and Germany were leading in the three other victory types. This gave me inspiration for the next production in my capital city. I decided that it would be wise to build the wonder of the stone hedges. This wonder provides you with a great profit. In other words, it pretty much just allows you to start your own religion. Since I already had that slight lead in religious victories, this seemed like the optimum path to take. In the city of Warsaw, I just started constructing a monument as it seemed like a good first building. Soon after, I sent my builders over to the copper deposit. I had my builders start constructing a copper mine as I wanted to utilize this resource. I hit two birds with one stone by doing this, as I now got copper, and I also had discovered some research towards the axle. My worst nightmare came true. My scouts discovered a barbarian camp right next to the city of Warsaw. Unlike the barbarian camps to the north and east, I was gonna have to take this one out. So I purchased some slingers with the little gold that I had. I was definitely gonna need a ranged unit as well as a melee unit to deal with the spearmen at this camp. I needed to let my warriors heal up before they did any fighting. In the meantime, I had my builders start constructing a quarry. This gained us information on masonry. I also had finally built up enough faith to create my own pantheon. There were so many different focuses that I could gear this pantheon towards. The one I ended up choosing was called Monument to the Gods. It provided a 15% production bonus to ancient and classical wonders. So in other words, it provided a 15% bonus to the Stonehenge construction. This meant that we were going to be 80 years ahead of what we originally anticipated. After discovering pottery and doing some more exploration, we finished looking into foreign trade. Sadly enough though, I didn't see any new government policies that caught my eye. Since our empire was leading religiously, I decided to focus on mysticism for our next civic policy. This would be beneficial to our society once our religion gets founded. I was feeling pretty grateful that I really only had to deal with one out of the 3 barbarian camps that I encountered. Surely enough though, my scout had discovered yet another barbarian camp to the south of my cities. This one was a lot further away, so it really shouldn't be a bother, but it is alarming to know that there's barbarian camps in every direction around my cities. While all of this was going on, one of my scouts discovered another city-state. Frederick informed me though that this city-state was not good news. He was pretty much telling me to stay away from it. I couldn't really tell if he was being genuine or if he just wanted the city-state for himself. Regardless of the situation, the show must go on. We had discovered writing, and I had also sent my builders over to Warsaw to construct a mine. This was very much needed because a mine would increase the production of our city, and right now we were lacking production in that city. I decided that it was finally time to start attacking the barbarian camp to the west of Warsaw. Before I had gotten my warriors close enough though, we had finished the construction of the stone hedge. This had meant that we got a great profit, and we were the very first society to build a wonder. Now would you look at that? Stunning. As soon as I possibly could, I sent my great profit over to the stone hedge. This is where the very first religion of the world was founded. I got to pick specifically what religion I wanted to create. After looking through all of my options, I decided that Catholicism would probably be the most appropriate, as I am playing as Poland. I could select 2 religious beliefs to found our religion on. I selected Feed the World as the first belief. This made every shrine and temple that we built provide +3 food and +2 housing. The second belief that I chose was Mosque. This allowed me to build mosques, which increased our faith by +3, and it also increased the spread of missionaries and apostles by +1. And that was it. Our religion was founded with the beliefs that we put in place. Since our religion was founded in Krakow, it looked like 2 citizens were already following it. Unfortunately, we were going to have to wait some time before it spread to Warsaw. Alright, now it's time to get back to taking out this barbarian encampment. I made a pretty big mistake though. I had moved my slingers in right next to the encampment, but I didn't realize that I couldn't move my warriors right next to them. Sure enough, the barbarian spearmen had taken advantage of this. They moved in to take out my slingers and did quite a lot of damage to them. I'm honestly just surprised they didn't fully get taken out. The second that I could, I moved my slingers back towards the town of Warsaw. I had then moved my warriors in between the slingers and the barbarian encampment. This would provide the unit some time to get away from the enemies and heal. 2 very unfortunate things then happened. It looked like the barbarians had sent over some warriors towards the city of Krakow, and also the volcano right next to it had erupted. Not really making things better, the research on animal husbandry had finished. I then made our next research, archery. To try and get the situation under control at Krakow, I sent my warriors back towards the city. I was really hoping that this would scare the enemy warriors away, but it looked like they were being supported by slingers, so this might be a little bit hard. Right as my warriors made it to the capital, I started production on some ranged troops. This would even the playing field. In the midst of all this going on, we had discovered mysticism. I still didn't see any new policies that I liked for our government, so I didn't change out any. I had also received my very first envoy that I could appoint. I sent them to Geneva because I would get a +2 science bonus while they're there. The enemy barbarians made their move. They had approached my capital with a warrior, and the slinger wasn't too far behind. I also noticed there was a second warrior unit directly behind the first warrior unit. I had my troops on the city attack the closest enemy unit. It seemed like a good idea to try and take out one of the enemies before they got all of their units in position. Let's hope I'll be able to do that. While I wasn't paying attention to my scouts, a barbarian scout started to attack one of mine. This seemed like a very coordinated attack. I wonder if all 4 barbarian encampments were working together to pull this off. I'm assuming they got nervous and banded together when I sent some troops over to the barbarian camp to the west. Since the slingers had finished training, I started construction on a holy site. That really wasn't my main priority right now though. I really just needed to take care of these barbarians. My warriors ended up taking some damage from the slingers, so I pulled them back. I didn't want them to take any more. I then utilized my slingers in the city to do some damage to the enemy warriors. Surely enough, the technology of archery had finished researching. This could be very valuable, especially in the situation that we're in right now. Before I even was going to consider upgrading my slingers though, I wanted to make sure that I had taken out one of the warrior units. Well, that solves that problem. The enemy slingers wanted to close the gap on my warriors and them, so I just kept moving my warriors further and further away from them. This way my slingers would be able to deal some damage to the enemy slingers if they tried to chase. My ranged unit had dealt with the second melee barbarian unit, and it seemed like they just had their ranged unit left. A random barbarian scout had been seen passing by Warsaw, so I sent my slingers in to deal some damage. Unfortunately, they weren't able to take him out in one attempt. This very well might have been a bait. The enemy spearmen from the barbarian camp had made their way over near my slingers. The spearmen weren't in range to attack my slingers though, so I just retreated them back to the city, and then upgraded them to archers. The slingers stationed in my capital were also due for a promotion. They had taken out 2 enemy barbarian units. The promotion that I chose for them gave them a +5% strength bonus towards land units. The barbarians finally had taken out one of my units. Their slingers had moved in and started to throw rocks at one of my scouts. This had taken them out, and we had lost our very first unit. It was hard to believe, but 2,000 years had already passed by since the founding of our empire. That meant there were only 400 years left in the ancient era. The holy site in our capital city had finished. It was a little bit weird because Frederick of Germany had then reached out to me and pretty much insulted me. I don't know why, but he said I was claiming land that I wasn't fit to rule. This made absolutely no sense because I didn't even settle another city. But whatever, I think that just validates my concern of earlier when it seemed like he was just power hungry and wanted control over the city-state nearby him. I wasn't going to give any merit to his aggressiveness, so I started creating a shrine in my capital city and then moved my archer unit to the west, closer to the barbarian encampment. The longer that this thing was standing, the more enemy barbarians I was going to have to deal with. My archers seemed to lure the barbarian spearmen out of their encampment. This was perfect because I was able to move them back into Warsaw and then rain down arrows at the enemy spearmen. Sure enough, the enemy spearmen had retreated after my archers rained down their arrows. This made sense because if they had stuck around, then we would be able to take them out and finally take down that barbarian encampment. It was time to go back on the offense. I planned on sending my warriors in and raining down some arrows on the camp. This unfortunately didn't work. My archers for some reason couldn't reach the enemies. This camp was really getting on my last nerves. In an attempt to become a little bit more level-headed, I started construction on a holy site in Warsaw. I had then gotten back to planning my attack. I ended up moving both of my troops in at the same time. I know when the spearmen make their move, they're going to focus in on my archers. I'm planning on at least one of them surviving, and then using both of my troops to take out the camp. With the shrine being completed, I hired my very first missionaries. They ended up costing around 150 faith, but I was now able to spread my religion to cities that weren't just adjacent to my current cities. I planned on sending this missionary to the Hungarian cities. Since they didn't currently have a religion, this would be an easy conversion. My troops then started to refocus in on the enemy units in the barbarian camp. We first sent in some arrows, and then I sent my warriors in to finish the job. This ended up being incredibly effective, and my warriors now had full control of the barbarian camp. My warriors did their job and dispersed the clan the second that they could. This completely ended up removing the barbarian encampment. It looked like a lot of the barbarians scattered to the sea. My archers started shooting arrows at the boats. This didn't really seem too effective though, because what are arrows going to do to boats? The ancient era ended. We had now just stepped into the classical era. Our society really killed it last era, so we moved into a golden age. I was able to pick what I wanted our golden age to be all about. Obviously, I picked religion. This provided newly trained holy units with extra movement and extra spread of religion. My plan for this era was to send out as many missionaries as I could and convert my whole continent to my religion. I wanted to make sure we had a solid foundation before we headed out to other continents. The missionary that I trained had made it to their very first foreign city. I immediately made them spread our religion, and the city instantly converted. This was a very satisfying sight to see because I now had 3 cities that were following my religion. It was about time that I appointed my very first governor. I had several different options, and each governor brought their own unique benefits to whatever city I stationed them in. The governor I selected was named Pingala. He provides a 15% science and culture bonus in whatever city he's in. Since Krakow already had a science campus, it made sense to send him there, as we would get a lot more bonus science. My builders finished trading in the capital city, and I started repairing the science campus that was recently destroyed. My archers to the southwest had also continued their bombardment of arrows on the barbarian ships. We still didn't really see any real damage, but we were slowly getting there. I discovered foreign trade a while ago, but we never got our first trade route set up. I decided that it would be valuable to spend some gold on a trader so that way we wouldn't have to train one. Back when the volcano erupted, it destroyed one of my stone quarries. I could now only construct a farm on this land as the quarry was destroyed. In the scientific campus in my capital, I decided to start constructing a library. This provided our civilization with +2 science every single turn. I then established our very first trade route. It went between the 2 cities that we had in our civilization. Even though it might seem a little bit weird to trade between my 2 cities, the biggest thing that I wanted to gain out of this was roads. As the trade route runs its course, roads get established between the 2 cities. This would pretty much link them together and allow for faster travel between them. My missionary had made it to the second Hungarian city that they converted to our religion. This now meant that there were 4 total cities following the religion of our empire. Out of absolutely nowhere, one of the rivers near Krakow decided to flood. Luckily enough, we didn't have anything built on that riverside, and it didn't affect our city at all. I now just know I need to be careful when placing buildings near it. My missionary had made it to yet another city in the Hungarian Empire. This one was a little bit different though. It was their capital. It was pretty obvious that it was their capital city because it was a lot harder to convert. I used one charge of my missionary and it didn't complete the job. It looks like we're going to have to rely on the other cities, as I'm going to send this next mercenary over to Germany. After what seemed like forever, my archers were finally able to sink both of the barbarian boats. Time to move on to the next one. My trader had almost made it to the capital city. You could see the roads that he was leaving behind him, which was pretty satisfying. My missionary had also just made it to the very first German city of Cologne. After my missionary's first attempt at trying to convert the city, it was successful. A German city was now following our religion. I'm honestly surprised that no other religion had been established on this continent. But hey, I'm not complaining, it's making it easier for me. We now had the capacity to take on another governor. I once again went through all of the different governor's skills and assessed which one would be best for our current situation. I ended up picking Amani. She specializes in a lot of diplomatic things. I was pretty excited because we had began research on currency. This was our very first classical era technology. I was checking out what the best path for spreading our religion would be. My grand plan was to spread it to all of the cities furthest away. This way, I would be able to convert all the cities on the outskirts and would it all come together full circle in the middle. I would also be able to save a few missionary charges this way because a lot of cities spread their faith to other cities that are right next to them. If the cities in the middle are completely surrounded by cities that have our faith, then it will spread to them without even having to use any missionary charges. Talking about missionaries, mine had made it over to the German capital. There, they used one charge to try and convert the city to our faith. This didn't work, so the next charge was definitely going towards that capital. There we go. We now had a capital of another country following our religion. This was a pretty huge stride because it meant that we were spreading very quickly. It also meant that we were able to influence a lot of other cities without having to use military force. I felt it was time to expand to another city. I started training a settler because of this. We were definitely falling behind in the aspect of how many cities we had. Germany had 4, Hungary had at least 3, and we only had 2. So it was important that we at least got another city down sometime soon. After what seemed like an eternity, my archers had finally sunk the last barbarian ship that was hanging around the old camp area. We finally finished researching currency. This was our very first classical era technology. Even though this really just seemed like another research project, it was actually a very big moment for our empire. I directed one of my builders to build a mine in Warsaw. I then noticed that one of Hungary's cities had a flashing red fist. This meant that it was going to fall to a rebellion very soon. It seemed like Hungary was really trying to overextend its power. They were settling cities faster than they could maintain them. The settlers that I had been training were finally ready to go and found a new city. My only problem now is finding where to put it. After surveying some land, I had found a pretty nice area right next to what looked like a mountain. While my settlers started to move to the location, I sent my newly trained missionaries to the capital of Hungary. I also tried to convert the northernmost German city of Hamburg. One charge was unfortunately not enough. We were making strides in our government. And what I mean by this is I was able to pick a brand new form of government that was more modern. I ended up choosing a classical empire. This updated form of government allowed me to tack on 2 new policies. The first one I chose made an envoy count as 2 when it was the first envoy sent to a city-state, and the other was increasing production of settlers by 50%. It looks like I know what we're going to be doing for the rest of the era, expanding. My missionaries had used their last charge on the city of Hamburg. Every single German city was now following the religion of Catholicism. This was pretty awesome, because I now had influence over every single German city through religion. It's been a while since we built our last wonder. I decided that I would try building the Hanging Gardens. So I purchased some new land and started construction on it right away. The Hanging Gardens increase housing by 2, and they also promote growth by 15% in every single city. Now that's not a bad wonder, especially if I'm able to build it in only a few hundred years. My settlers made it to the next location that I wanted a city to be founded on. They had founded the city of Radom. It was pretty close to Krakow, but this was an ideal spot to put it because it pretty much created a border with Hungary and prevented them from expanding too much into our area. The first production that I ordered in the city of Radom was a watermill. This increased our food output as well as our production in that city. Obviously, with new cities, you're going to want as much production as you can get. That way, you can start producing buildings a lot faster. My first priority in this new city was to get it established as quickly as possible. I sent some builders over and instantly constructed a farm. It seemed like at this point, we had more cities that were following our religion than there weren't, at least on this continent. I was really curious to see if I was going to be able to get the city of Szeged. The rebelled people seemed very interested in joining our empire as we were the leaders of the religion that they had followed. It was almost like Emperor Frederick had known exactly what I was thinking. He started to have another delusional fit and said that I was claiming too much land. I didn't actually do anything to get this insult, he just kinda did it out of nowhere. Immediately after, Frederick had reached out to me asking for some of my iron. Considering how he was just talking to me, there was no way I was going to accept this trade deal. It really didn't even seem like a good trade deal anyways, cause then he would have more iron than I would. I was really making a lot of progress with my missionaries. It seemed like there were around 4 cities left on the continent that haven't been converted. Every other one was a part of our religion. One of my trade routes had finished. It was now time to start another one. I honestly just reinstated the same trade route that had already been going. The extra production was worth it. The Hanging Gardens had finished in my capital city. This was the second wonder that we had built. It seemed like we also had discovered horseback riding and drama and poetry. This little span of time was a huge discovery era for us. We were completing a lot. I also started construction on our very first government building. King Matthias had proposed a trade deal. He wanted all of my political favor for just 2 gold coins every single turn. This didn't really seem like a fair deal, because then I would have 0 political favor and he would have all of it. It made no sense at all to help him get closer to a diplomatic victory just for a few coins. And there we go with another city. Since we became pretty familiar with ironworking now, I spent around 20 iron and 110 gold to upgrade my warriors to swordsmen. I had also then sent my missionaries over to what I thought was the last city that needed to be converted. Things weren't as they appeared though, because as I was assigning Reyna, the new governor who specialized in land acquisition, to Radom, I had noticed that the Germans settled another city. This meant that the entire continent was no longer under my religion. There was just one city and one city-state that we were waiting for. It finally happened. The city of Szeged that rebelled from Hungary had joined our empire. I was super hyped about this, as it was a very strategically placed city. Well, at least it was strategically placed for me. I was going to utilize this as a perfect border city with Radom. We could completely block off Hungarian expansion if we were able to connect Szeged and Radom together. The only complaint I had out of this exchange was that it was a brand new city, so the production was really bad. And actually, now that I look at it, it's pretty far away from the rest of my other cities. It looks like we're gonna have to get a trade route going here as soon as possible. I ended up reassigning Reyna to Szeged. The reason being is I wanted it to expand as quickly as possible, and also sending a governor to a brand new city is a great idea, especially since it promotes loyalty. In our newly built government plaza, I decided to build an ancestral hall. This building provides 50% increase in production towards settlers, it allows new cities to start with a builder, and also we get a new governor title from it. All of that sounds good to me. Randomly enough, King Frederick had made a proposal to me. He wanted to get all of our diplomatic favor in return for a few coins. I legit just rejected King Matthias's proposal on the same deal. It was pretty obvious that Germany and Hungary were both eyeing the diplomatic victory. It was definitely in my plans to never give them any of my diplomatic favor, especially since I knew their true intentions. The Polish Empire was expanding very quickly. I decided to send out some settlers to try and settle a brand new city. This would surely keep the momentum going, and I would be able to get even more land. For absolutely no reason at all, a random barbarian scout made their way over to my city of Szeged. I don't know if they were just scouting it out to see what happened since we newly acquired it, but I was able to test out my newly upgraded swordsmen. Trust me, I wasn't disappointed. My swordsmen were able to pretty much take the unit out, as it only had a sliver of health remaining. Even though I was planning on having my settlers build a city in the south, I ended up not doing it. I sent them back up to the north as it seemed like it would be more appropriate to have a city between my capital and the German cities. I had a missionary sitting at the city-state that wasn't following our religion. I had them convert it, and we now converted all of the city-states on the island to Catholicism. Another random barbarian scout had appeared near one of my cities. They must be planning something big, especially with all of the scouting going on. Those pesky barbarians weren't the only ones who had plans. I had 2 builders ready to work on the infrastructure of our cities. Before we know it, they'll be thriving. Out of nowhere, a random dust storm had swept over the lands right outside of my borders of Krakow and Warsaw. I really hope that it doesn't expand any further into my cities. Even though I was taking the route of a religious victory, I still realized the importance on putting a lot of focus in science. This would allow us to advance our technology as quickly as possible. It really comes around full loop when you think about it. The better our technology is, the more means of spreading our religion we have. As my settlers approached the potential city location, Germany had decided to relay a message to me. They pretty much just told me that I shouldn't be claiming so much land, and got very aggressive about it. Too bad for them. What are they gonna do, declare war on me? Regardless if they do, we'll be ready. I started to put some emphasis on defensive tactics in our civics tree. If it really comes down to it, we'll be able to protect our cities with ease. My settlers arrived at the location. The city of Gdansk was founded. We now had a buffer between Germany and Krakow. In the long term, I also planned on building a war encampment slightly more towards the border, so that way we had 2 points that could protect us in case Germany tried to attack. With the new arrival of builders in Szeged, I had them build a pasture. This improved the city's production, as well as provided 2 horses per turn. A random volcano near Gdansk started to erupt. Thankfully enough, it was a very gentle eruption, so we didn't have to worry about any buildings being destroyed. To be fair though, there weren't really that many buildings to be destroyed in the first place. This was a new city after all. Germany seemed to be watching our civilization like a hawk. They immediately requested that we trade horses with them in exchange for open borders. This was not a good deal once again. They were just trying to benefit. I also have no idea how they found out that we just recently got horses. I sent one of my scouts out to the south of Warsaw. That was when I noticed 2 swordsmen approaching my city. They were barbarians. It was now clear what the intention of all of those scouts were doing around my cities earlier. They clearly wanted to see which one was the easiest to attack, so that way they could plan one. I immediately had my defensive archers start raining down arrows on the swordsmen as they approached Warsaw. I started to get a little bit nervous, because my archers didn't do that much damage to the swordsmen. They only did a quarter of its health. Despite this, the barbarian swordsmen still retreated. They brought their archers in a lot closer. Now these were some units that I knew I could take out pretty easily. While this little invasion was going on in Warsaw, I had started building a wonder in Krakow. It's called the Mahabodhi Temple. It provides 2 apostles as well as 2 victory points towards the diplomatic victory. Oh yeah, and also it provides +4 faith per turn. I guess I wasn't complaining that I got diplomatic victory points, but I thought that it would make more sense that I would get religious victory points for this wonder. After thinking about it for some time, I kind of realized this was a good thing. It prevents Germany and Hungary from being able to get those points, which pretty much means that I'll be able to keep the lead. A random city-state had sent over some warriors to help me fight off the enemies near Warsaw. That was when the barbarians decided to target my scout and kind of retreat. Well, I regret saying that. The barbarians sent 2 swordsmen back in near the city. It looks like we're on the defensive again. Real quick, if you're enjoying the content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Things weren't looking the best. We just advanced into the medieval era, and unfortunately, entered a dark age. Oh yeah, and don't forget about the barbarians. The first medieval research that we had completed was apprenticeship. It was quite a coincidence that this had finished on the same exact year that it became the medieval era. Luckily enough, to avoid getting another dark age, we were able to pick a dedication, which pretty much granted us era score each time we worked towards it. Surprisingly enough, my archers were still holding out against the swordsmen around Warsaw. It was also time that I was able to appoint a new governor. I chose Liang, which allowed builders built in the city that she governs to have 1 extra charge. Of course, I sent her to Gdansk, as I needed to make sure that the loyalty of that city was staying up, since it was at the border and it was newly founded. I got invited to the World Congress. This was something that didn't really exist until this era. The purpose of this Congress was to get all of the countries together and have them vote on certain things. For the very first policy that I got to vote on, I ended up choosing that purchasing units with gold would be plus 100% more expensive. The second thing I voted on was to prevent Hungary's borders from being able to expand from culture. Surprisingly enough, both of my proposals had passed. This was honestly great because I didn't plan on purchasing any units with my gold, and also I didn't want Hungary to expand their borders into my territory. Being in the medieval era, it appeared that all of my cities now had a set of crossbowmen to protect it. This was so clutch. I was able to take out one of the barbarian units around Warsaw with them. Well, at least I was able to do most of the damage with them and finish them off with my archers. Unfortunately enough, the river that Szeged was on had completely flooded. This did damage to the city, as well as the unit that was in it. I guess let's start rebuilding. In Radom, I started a construction project on an industrial zone. This would increase the production of our city by quite a bit. This was important, especially since it was a border city. The last barbarian unit that was stationed in my territory stood no chance. I had my archers fling arrows at them, and then moved in my second archer unit to finish them off. The city was secured once again. With our focus in science for this era, we had been able to achieve a great scientist. I immediately recruited him and sent him over to our holy site. This provided us with plus 100 faith, as well as more faith spread, and also some science points. The Warsaw trade route had completed. I could now select the next city that I wanted it to go to. Obviously, I ended up choosing Szeged. This was honestly ideal. I would now be able to have a road built between Warsaw and Szeged. This would surely bring a lot more production to Szeged. The Mahabodhi Temple finished constructing. Now that thing looks impressive. As promised, I received my apostles. It was pretty awesome because it looked like this unit was able to add on more beliefs into our religion. After staring at all of the beliefs, I had adopted one called Pilgrimage. This provided plus 2 faith for every single city that was following my religion. That was pretty crazy because I had a whole continent following my religion. My faith per turn changed from 27 all the way up to 67. That's insane. Obviously, I started to look at the other beliefs with my second apostle. The second belief that I ended up choosing was called Scripture. This increased the outgoing pressure of all of the cities following this religion by 25%. Once we discover printing, it looks like it'll go up to 50%. This belief is definitely going to be useful in the long term. Sadly enough, one of my scouts that was exploring near the southern barbarian encampment had been taken out by some barbarians. This was pretty annoying, but at the same time, we were landlocked, and there wasn't really anywhere else for us to explore, so we really didn't need the scout units at this point anymore. On top of losing a unit, the river near Gdansk had flooded and caused a lot of damage to the city as well as some of the buildings around it. We had discovered the system of feudalism. This was the very first form of government from the medieval period that we had discovered. Very close to the river that had just flooded, a volcanic eruption that was catastrophic had occurred. Some barbarian pikemen had also started to rush the city of Warsaw. The medieval era was really tearing us apart. We had to deal with a dark age, barbarians, and a lot of natural disasters. Some of my builders had just arrived at the city of Gdansk, just to repair what was destroyed from the flood. I didn't even realize it, but it also looked like there was a barbarian pikeman right next to the city of Krakow. I was pretty shocked that these barbarians were that smart. They were really taking advantage of all of these natural disasters that were going on near my cities. From their perspective though, I get it. It makes the most sense to attack your enemy when he's dealing with a bunch of other things rather than fighting him when he's at his strongest. Unfortunately enough for the barbarians, they didn't really have enough units to really do anything to any of my cities. The only damage that they could really cause was destroying the buildings that were outside of my cities. In other words, they really couldn't do much to affect our empire. Well, that was easy. They didn't even stand a chance. The barbarians had set up an encampment directly to the west of Krakow. This explains why we had to defend the city from barbarians. Usually, they don't make it this far up here. It appeared that there were some pikemen and skirmishers heading towards one of my cities. I had to defend them with the few archers that I had. Unfortunately, one of those units was on the brink of death. They were in the middle of the battle and didn't have a chance to escape. And I'm not surprised. I was purely playing a numbers game at this point. We outnumbered the pikemen with our archers, but our archers did almost no damage to the pikemen. Thankfully, that game paid off. We were able to take out the pikemen, but I still had to worry about the skirmishers. They disappeared into thin air. Uh-oh, it looks like we found them, along with another pikeman unit. While this battle was going on, I had trained a chariot. It seemed like this unit was able to travel long distances, but it didn't really seem too effective against the skirmishers. Good thing I got some backup horsemen. It was now the enemy's move. They had sent their skirmishers right in front of my archers. I was a little bit confused about this because I would have thought that they would use their melee against my ranged. This ended up working out though. I had my first set of archers that remained shoot arrows at the skirmishers, and then I had my full group of archers finish them off. That was when I sent my chariot in to get a little bit closer to the barbarian camp. They had discovered an enemy crossbow unit. The barbarians weren't joking around. They had used that crossbow unit to take out one of my remaining archer units, and then more pikemen had rushed into the battle. It seemed like these barbarians had come a long way. They had much better units than what we had, and that was shocking because they were a small little encampment. We were a whole civilization. The enemy units started to surround my chariots. This was a little bit strange because I would have thought they would use their pikemen to handle my horsemen. I was able to get a glimpse into the enemy territory. I saw that they had another pikeman approaching. I retreated my troops back towards Krakow, and then the enemies had followed. There really wasn't much more that we could do. I had to just keep sending as many troops as we could produce towards the enemies in hopes that we would be able to overwhelm them. At least, I thought this was going to be the only solution we could pull off. It appeared that the enemies were sending their troops more south though. This was a good time for me to send my horsemen right past them and take out the barbarian camp if possible. I didn't want the barbarian war to get in the way of spreading a religion. It was time to send some missionaries overseas in search for a new continent. I don't know if there was 2 of them out there, I don't know if there was 3 of them out there, I don't know if we were the only continent in this world. But it was time to send the missionaries out to explore. My Spec Ops horsemen really weren't that sneaky. One of them was spotted and attacked by the enemy pikemen as well as enemy crossbowmen. I sent that same horseman unit in to retaliate against the enemy crossbow unit. They had completely taken them out. Soon after, I had used a second horseman unit that I had to go right towards the enemy barbarian encampment. My other units sure were a good distraction. Honestly, they were too good of a distraction. The enemy pikemen had surrounded them and taken them out, making the ultimate sacrifice for our kingdom. I wasn't going to let this go unnoticed. I'll make sure that these troops go down in history. The barbarian encampment had put up a very weak defense against my horsemen. They shot a few arrows, but they weren't really effective. It was only a matter of years before my horsemen had completely flushed out all of the enemy skirmishers, and we had taken over the barbarian camp. This was really exciting news because we now had control over the only encampment that was causing us issues. I had completely forgot about the pikemen units though. They were marching their way towards Warsaw. It looks like this fight isn't over yet. It seemed like the barbarians weren't too happy that we had destroyed their home. It only made them more mad and more anxious to get over to our city and start causing it damage. Our civilization had discovered a new government style, monarchy. Even though we had just discovered it, it didn't seem like an appropriate time to switch governments, especially in the middle of fighting off a whole bunch of enemies. The missionaries I sent out made it over to the water. Unfortunately, they weren't able to sail very far. The boats that they were currently in were not strong enough to sail across the sea. This, unfortunately, was something we were going to have to work towards now. The second ever World Congress was now in school. I ended up voting for plus 100% city-state yield from trade city-states. I also voted to not allow any points to go towards the great profit person. This would ensure that it would be a lot harder for other religions to be founded, and we would remain on top. Surprisingly enough, both policies that I voted for passed. It was time that another envoy was ready to be sent out. I sent them over to the city-state of Zanzibar. We just reached 3 envoys in their city-state, and they pledged full loyalty to us. Germany didn't seem very happy about this. King Frederick himself had reached out and said that he would destroy us if we help out that city-state too much. Well, it looks like somebody's a little jealous. It wasn't long until King Frederick had reached out again. This time, he said that we were expanding too fast. In other words, he was just scared that we were going to expand so much, he wouldn't be able to claim any of the land. With Germany being such a pain, Hungary seemed to be a much better ally. They had asked to establish an embassy in our capital. This would surely increase our relationship, possibly leading to a friendship later on in the future. So I of course allowed them to establish their embassy. The world progressed into the Renaissance era. I was pretty happy about this because our nation had escaped the Dark Age that we were previously in, and we were now in a normal age. Since my primary focus is to get my missionaries across the sea onto new lands, I decided to end up going with the religious perk for this era. For every city that I come across and convert to my religion, I will gain 2 era points. Let's just really hope that we find another continent out there though. For the first time in our relationship, Germany had finally offered a good trade. They offered to give us a resource we didn't have in exchange for some of our horses. Now that's not something I'm going to complain about. A lot of time had passed since our last government reform, so I had finally changed our government to a monarchy. I really have no idea why I didn't do this sooner. Even though we were at war at the time, this could have been done and we would have unlocked 2 more policy slots. Some of these policies included reduced unit maintenance fee, as well as plus 100% holy site adjacency bonus. Since the medieval era, our society had been focusing on science. I say it was well deserved, but we had finally received a great scientist. After establishing a new trade route, I had moved the scientist over to the science campus near Warsaw. This scientist had boosted our research in astronomy, cartography, and sanitization. It looks like our science programs are paying off. Right after this had happened, Matthias of Hungary had offered another terrible trade. It really seems like Germany and Hungary don't know how to offer trades that benefit both sides. I would think that it would be pretty obvious. If you're offering a trade to another country that only benefits you, why would they ever accept it? I guess this just wasn't clear to them. Our kingdom had discovered the government type of theocracy. I wasn't going to switch to this one because I like the benefits of monarchy much better. With this strident government, I was able to upgrade one of our governors. And that was when Germany insulted me again. They had offered another trade that wasn't even close to fair. It was pretty funny because Germany was saying that we were struggling, but it looked like another one of their cities was falling under a rebellion. This meant that we would be able to take it from them if we so desired. We needed to start producing some more gold. To solve this, I ended up placing down a commercial hub in the outskirts of Warsaw. We had discovered our very first Renaissance technology. It was cartography. I know for a fact maps will sell good at our new commercial hub. It seemed like our society was very invested in religion and science. Now we just need to start focusing a bit more on our economy and we'll be set. Well, I guess we won't be acting on that plan just yet. I sent my envoy over to a city-state that increased our capital's production. This didn't really help out with the whole gold situation, but we'll pretend that that didn't happen. Anyways, my missionaries had head out. They had already discovered another continent while barely even sailing away from ours. This was extraordinary news. There was another city-state sitting right on that continent. That meant that there were more cities for us to convert. Out of absolutely nowhere, Pericles of Athens had reached out to me. He wanted to see where our capital was, in exchange for information on where his was. I obviously accepted, and that was when I had discovered the technology of gunpowder. These are very exciting times indeed. As my missionaries had made their way closer to the new continent we discovered, which I assumed was the homeland of Greece, we had found the Great Barrier Reef. This natural wonder was absolutely beautiful. I wish it was a lot closer to our cities. With all of this excitement going on, I had told my researchers to start looking into metal casting. And that was when we stepped foot for the very first time on another continent that was one but our own. I had a feeling that we were going to be using missionaries like crazy, so I ended up training another one. We really did have a good amount of faith stored up to keep buying more, but I wanted to make sure that I was able to get them to places in a good amount of time. Especially after seeing how far Athens really is, it was a little bit hard to tell that if the continent that we discovered was connected to the one that Athens was on. It really didn't seem likely considering how far away the two were. I guess my missionaries will let us know. Right as they had arrived at the city of Fez, they did their job spreading our religion. Catholicism spread fast in Fez. Since they didn't have any beliefs of their own, it seemed like the citizens were adopting our religion very quickly. Once again, with our religious efforts taking off, we had discovered banking. This technology was going to be great for our economy. Our science also wasn't doing half bad either. The second missionary ship had finally touched down on some land. And that was when we had discovered something very promising. 2 more city-states. This was going to be a great foundation for our religion to start spreading onto this new continent. I was 100% convinced at this point that the first land that we had come across was actually just a small island, and this was the other continent that we had been looking for. My apostles made a discovery, which seemed pretty bad. It looked like there were 2 other religions that existed on this continent. If we're gonna want to become the dominant religion on this second continent, I'm gonna have to start spreading my missionaries out very quickly. So that's exactly what I ordered them to do. Right when they got in range of the nearest city, they instantly started spreading our religion. It'll only be a matter of time before we have influence on the cities that are on the coast we landed on. Even though we were busy to the west, a great merchant had joined our society back in the east. Surely enough, Greece wasn't happy that we were converting the cities around them to our religion. Even though they couldn't really blame us for anything, they had reached out telling us to be careful and not to mess with the cities around them. We did it! We converted our first city on the second continent to fully follow our religion. So much for Greece's warning. Greece's competing religion had also happened to be in the city right next to the one we had converted. After converting yet another city-state on the new continent, I sent over some apostles to the city that was under the control of another religion. The only way that we were going to secure our faith on this new continent was if we had a network of cities all reinforcing the religion. Apparently, Greece didn't like this. They had told me that I needed to move my apostles out of there as soon as possible. The missionaries that I used to convert Fez had made it to the most northern part of the map. Surely enough, well up there, they had stumbled upon a few barbarians. Who would have thought? My clergymen were doing a great job at spreading the religion as much as they possibly could. We had already converted 3 different cities on the new continent. Greece really didn't like that I had already converted one of their cities. I was wondering how they were going to react once we get this second one. Realistically, there were only 2 possibilities. They declare war on us, or they just keep up their petty little threats. Honestly though, I don't think they have a very valid reason to go to war with us. We peacefully converted their cities to our religion, and the people decided to follow us. It's not like we forced them. Regardless of the consequences, we were going for a religious victory, so I wasn't going to stop sending my missionaries over now. Just as expected, Greece had reached out to us. I had expected them to make a comment about converting their cities. They didn't. They had brought up the city-states that we were interacting with. And of course, I spoke way too soon. They had finally denounced me. Now I know for a fact, they're not very happy about our religious conquest. I have a feeling that being denounced is going to set the tone for this era. We're only going to keep converting more cities to our religion, and that's probably going to just keep making even more people hate us. I was very proud of our civilization, because we had struck a golden age. It seemed like there really weren't any bonuses that focused on faith or religion. So I ended up picking one that increased our production by quite a bit. To try and make the start of this era a little bit better, I began constructing a holy site. We were already generating a lot of faith per turn, but I knew if I pushed for more, we would be able to achieve the religious victory even quicker. Randomly enough, a city named Magdeburg that belonged to Germany had started to rebel. Since it was following our religion completely, it wanted to join our empire. I was super hesitant about this at first, for the pure reason that I didn't want to take on too many cities. At the same time though, Magdeburg was placed in such a strategic location between me and the other land that we could potentially settle. I ended up taking it into our empire. Honestly, I was stoked that we were able to take this city from Germany. They were talking all this and that earlier, but now look who can't maintain their empire. While I was improving the infrastructure of our cities, Pachacuri of Inca had reached out to me. As usual, he was very friendly for now, but I'm sure later on once we convert his cities, he won't be. Also, from the world stage, I had realized that we met every single civilization in our world. I then realized that I had some pretty outdated units. I upgraded some pikemen into musketmen. I also upgraded some horsemen into coursers. Now they look cool. The river that Gdansk sat on had completely flooded, and it ended up causing a lot of destruction to the buildings that were in the area. I immediately sent over some builders to try and curb the situation. Even though I had a lot of missionaries that were out there on the second continent, and some heading there were a lot more cities that we still had to conquer. And when I say conquer, I mean spread our religion to. With all of this focus on the second continent, I had decided that we needed to focus a little more on our original one. So I ended up training a settler and sending them west. I intended on creating a city on the coast. The World Congress was in play. I voted on this one policy that increased the cost of units with gold by 100%. Surprisingly enough, this passed. To be honest, I only voted on this because I thought everyone else would vote to increase the price of units with faith. Thankfully, they didn't, so we're chillin'. This next wave of missionaries is gonna be crazy, there's so many of them. Our research was progressing a little bit slower than I thought it would. I began looking into the scientific theory. Once this completes, it'll be the very first industrial era research that we've completed. Germany proposed a trade deal. They wanted some of my horses for 65 gold and open borders. What was I even gonna do with such little gold and access to walk in their territories? I didn't need to send any more missionaries over there, and even if I did, they're not restricted by borders, so this trade really provided no value at all to me. After rejecting Germany's proposal, we had completed the world's first circumnavigation. This meant that somewhere, one of my units had completely gone around the world. I'm assuming it was one of the missionaries. One of Hungary's cities had completely rebelled. They wanted to join my empire. This time I said no though. This city really provided no strategic benefits, and it was just located in a very crummy area. Not one that I was interested in, at least. It low-key was a very good buffer, just in case one of the two countries nearby wanted to declare war on me. They wouldn't be able to travel through the city-state, so we had a lot less to worry about. Our scientists had discovered the scientific theory. This was great because it was our very first industrial era research. 3 more of my missionaries had arrived onto the second continent. I planned on using them to fully convert Pergamon. That was when I noticed a Hungarian city on the border was about to rebel. This seemed like it was an appropriate time to place down a war encampment just in case things go south. My plans at Pergamon had completed. We had a majority of religious followers in the city, so it now belonged to us. Apparently, this change didn't really sit well with most of the nations. An emergency meeting was called in the World Congress. They wanted to discuss the recent conversion. Apparently, if I can hold the city with my religion for over a certain amount of time, I'll be able to keep it and our religion will spread more. If not, then I'll receive a whole bunch of sanctions. Despite voting against this several different times, it still passed. It really seemed like everybody was on board with sanctioning my religion. Well, it looks like it's time to do the impossible. Every other world religion was completely against me in this situation. They were gonna send their missionaries over to try and convert Pergamon. Honestly, this was a bit stressful. I started to train as many missionaries as I possibly could. I was also sending out some that I already had trained. You could tell that I was flustered because I had lost one missionary to a random barbarian unit. I even redirected some other missionaries to a random spot that they shouldn't have been at. Of course, right as all of this was going on, one of the rivers near my cities had flooded. Well, this couldn't have been any better timing. Thankfully enough, I was able to kind of just ignore what was going on and knew that my workers would take care of it. That way I would be able to focus all of my efforts on sending my missionaries out and fully securing Pergamon. The leader of Greece was getting very upset at this point. He reached out to tell me that if I didn't build more ships, no one would respect me. I don't know if he could really talk all that right now in the middle of his cities being completely dominated by my religion. Of course, right in the middle of this holy war, I had completed another wonder, Hagia Sophia. It was pretty hilarious that we were relaxing over here building world wonders while everybody else was panicking and trying to stop me from spreading my religion. To be honest, I don't even know if most of the countries were even trying to stop me. It seemed like they could barely keep themselves together. Hungary had lost yet another city to rebellion. They happily had joined my empire where we would actually be able to take care of them. I think the biggest fleet of missionaries that I had ever sent out roamed the sea. They were heading over to Pergamon to secure it, and possibly even past it to convert more cities. Right as the lads had reached the shore, I sent one of my missionaries that was over at Pergamon to the next city. This one didn't belong to Greece, so I'm sure I'm gonna get denounced a whole bunch more times after I convert this one. My missionaries spread, and they were doing their job well. Too well. Pashakuti himself had reached out to me, asking me not to spread my religion to his cities. Of course, I used some diplomatic favor to tell him that it wouldn't happen again, and he believed us. But we both know that's not the truth. A great merchant had seen that we were flourishing and decided to come to our city. He ended up providing us with plus 0.5 gold per each trade route. This was pretty insane if you ask me. I then was able to pick yet another governor. I was pretty happy about this because we only needed one more in order to get every single governor we possibly could. And that's how we do it. We held Pergamon with our religion for the amount of time that we had to. It was clear that every other world religion was jealous. This allowed us to gain 200 diplomatic favor, as well as a whole bunch of outgoing pressure from the city itself. Oh yeah, baby, it's time to put those missionaries back to work. The whole world thought that we could stop us, and they couldn't. We're basically invincible, at least religiously. I really hope that nobody declares war on us though. That is a possibility, and it's probably my biggest weakness. But like I said earlier, I really doubt that missionaries are a big enough reason for someone to declare war on us. Maybe I spoke too soon. We just got denounced again. Well, that's not gonna stop me. It seemed like at this point, all I was doing was converting and training more missionaries. I guess to be fair, I did have missionaries on the south of the second continent, as well as the north. At this point, I was certain that someone was going to declare war on me, so I upgraded one of my units into a cannon. This way, if anyone tries to even approach the city, they'll get blasted. Out of nowhere, I had received a random communication. It was from Philip, King of Spain, Portugal, and many other places. I was absolutely confused, because I had thought that I had already met all of the other civilizations in this world. Apparently not. The industrial era was coming to a close, and we were killing it. We converted so many different cities that I'm sure we're guaranteed a golden era. After checking out where Spain was located on the map, the wonder Mount St. Michael had finished constructing. This thing was awesome. It was pretty much a castle built on top of a mountain. The construction of a wonder is always a good way to top off the end of an era. The vibes were killed though. I had noticed that there was a city not following my religion on the very first island we had discovered. This was super frustrating because I had to send over a missionary to try and convert the city. Unexpectedly, I had unlocked another governor. This ended up being the very last one that I could possibly recruit. We now had the max number of government officials. At this point, I was suffering from success. Spain had denounced me, and Hungary had randomly reached out saying some nonsense. I couldn't really figure out what King Matthias was trying to say even. All of his cities rebelling must be getting to his head. The industrial era was officially over, and I was shocked. We didn't reach a gold era. It was just a normal one, and that was kind of frustrating because we were making great strides with our religion and our society in general. I was a little bit salty that we didn't get a golden era, but I guess we could always get one next time. After moping about the era, I had unlocked a great general. After he traveled to Krakow, he provided one free Spec Ops unit. Apparently, Hungary didn't like this because they had denounced me right after. It's pretty hysterical because every single civilization except Germany had denounced me at this point. Denouncements really didn't mean anything. And honestly, they couldn't declare war on me because I wasn't doing anything that was bad. This situation was just hilarious overall. I then trained my very first spy. I needed to select an operation for them to do at a certain city, so I picked a random German city and tried to steal technology from it. It said that I only had a 33% chance at success, but I guess we'll take the risk. At this point, what's the worst that can happen? Germany denounces me? Well, isn't that a shocker? That's exactly what they did. They had no idea that I even had a spy in one of their cities though. This was just because everybody else was denouncing me, they decided to jump on the bandwagon. Our civilization had finally constructed our very first warboat. I was considering having one of the cities build one of these earlier, but there really wasn't a need. The only thing I can really do with this thing is take out random barbarian ships that aren't even really a bother, they're just kind of hanging out. A bunch of my missionaries had just landed near Spain's territories. I honestly didn't think that it was going to take super long to convert all of Spain's cities to our religion. They were the last civilization in the whole world that wasn't following it. Right after we had discovered flight, I started to move my missionaries in to the very first Spanish city that we could see. I was a little bit concerned because it looked like Spain had quite a few holy warriors. These were people who could kill my missionaries. The conversion began. Spain had immediately responded and pretty much told us to stop doing it. I wasn't gonna listen though, so I ended up using some diplomatic favor to kind of just shrug them off. I ended up converting another city, and after that, even another one. Our religion was unstoppable. At this point, every city that founded another religion was mostly following our religion. That's pretty crazy to think about. Every civilization was well aware of this. They even held an emergency meeting to kind of do what they did before when I had taken over Greece's religious city. As a last resort, it seemed like some missionaries from Spain were sent out to my continent to try and convert a city. They successfully did this, so I just went and took it back. I had then checked the last cities that I needed to convert and went to go convert them. Spain once again denounced me, and Greece did too. Little did they know, this wasn't going to do anything because it was way too late. I had converted the very last city that wasn't following my religion.
We need to believe in something greater than ourselves. We crave solace in the darkness, and light unto our path. Thanks to you, we found meaning amid the cosmos.